So, welcome to this panel discussion. I am Pontus Lögdahl, and I've met most of you, but for those who don't know you, I've spent most of my life in sales and client relations. And I've been doing that for over 20 years, so that's, I guess, why I'm leading this discussion over here. And my mission here today is to guide you through this discussion. So if you have any questions or are dying to jump in, go ahead. Just raise your hand and I'll try to let you in. It's going to be as interactive as possible. And the topic today is what makes a senior engineer senior, and how is that related to the role as a consultant. And speaking of senior, please meet our panel here today. Our beloved colleagues spearheading the discussions, and the participants is Mikael Carlsson, that for the past 25 years, been a prominent figure in the IT industry. He is a progressive full-stack developer who occasionally wrestles with the urge to tell inappropriate jokes at less than ideal moments. Please welcome Mikael. And then we have Mikael Carlsson. Mikael Carlsson är det på svenska. This tall guy has a solid decade of front-end engineering under his belt, and even if you can't tell it from the length of his beard, he is arguably equally senior as the other guy. And then we have Iggsten, a strong arguer for what is right, a painter of colors in gray, time bender, a real dreamer, and he has operated as a manager for many years, as a mentor and storyteller. And his favorite quote is, "Life consists not in holding good cards, but playing those you hold well." And then we have Klas Enochsson, who has been in the salt mine of the IT industry for over 6 years. And he's always curious, interested in learning new cool stuff, and consider himself to be a really senior Leksand IF supporter. So, seniority as an engineer. And in the role as a consultant, and how is that translated in your role as a consultant? Why do you think we have even this term of seniority in the business? Why have we categorized it like that?
Well, I can start. I've been thinking a lot about this the past week since we decided to do this talk, and I'm really curious about who do we actually address when we talk about the senior engineer or a senior consultant. Is it for internal use or is it for our clients? And I'm not sure myself yet, so it's a really tricky question.
Yeah, it depends on what you mean by seniority. It can mean different things, I think. Like, is it technically seniority? Is it like on a social thing, or what do we mean by? I don't know. 10, 15 years ago, I never heard the term senior. I don't know if I was under some kind of shelter or anything like that, but I didn't hear the term. It's something new, like the 15. And I guess, from my perspective, it's like easier to like set price for a consultant, for instance, if you have some kind of, level on what he can deliver to the customer, maybe.
So with that said, if it's a price level, is the word senior also like a stamp of quality, or
Asking me, or
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I guess that is the aim for the goal for the term, maybe. Without knowing, I don't really know what senior means, but myself, like I think you cannot call yourself senior. I think other people call you senior, maybe.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And another question here is, I mean, is seniority, is it about years of experience? Or is it about what you have experienced and what you have learned?
I mean, I'm just going to grab there immediately, of course. Yes, and I've fallen into the pitfall now, saying, yes, years of experience matters a lot, but it's not about the actual years itself. It's about exploring and experiencing a lot of different things. And this is my key take, and I did some Googling before, just trying to benchmark my assumptions, but there is no information to be found. We hear this expression on a daily basis, like seniority, junior. There are so many abbreviations in the industry that we are working in. But my simple interpretation of all this, experience makes you fitted to solve problems that you haven't encountered before. And I think this is a key takeaway. And you can only do this by exposing yourself for many different situations. So it's not like I've done this for 10 years, I'm fitted to solve all problems. You have to try a lot of different things, clients, people, ways of working. And I think we've seen different examples of this today. Like so many different ways of actually solving one problem. There isn't a single solution for that. And I think that is, I mean, especially for me, presenting solutions to customers, senior is some sort of guarantee that regardless of what you will encounter, putting this person into the room probably going to solve it without saying how to solve it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is that with age, or is it like more responsibility?
I'm going to fall into the philosophy part of everything. I mean, of course, I've seen junior developers that are super experienced and fitted to solve unique problems that you couldn't imagine. And then I've seen senior people, again, sticking to the standard, that has not been fitted to solve certain problems. So it's not only due to time. I think it's the dynamics of what you have been exposed for during amount of years or time, so to say.
You're talking about me, aren't you?
Yes.
But don't you think that there's two types of people then? Those that actually take on complex problems and solve them, and those that don't, regardless of the title. Because like you said, Michael, or Mikael, 15 years ago, this wasn't really on the horizon, I don't think. 15 years ago, no one talked about being a junior or senior. You were just a developer. And I think that with the sort of maturing IT industry, web development industry, and the sort of shift that I experienced going from a web designer position into a front-end or UI UX position, I think then it sort of started. You needed to put a label on people to know how long they had been doing a certain thing.
Yeah. And speaking about years, I mean, if we consider there is a business approach to it as well, I mean, seniority is a label of how much money you can charge of a customer or ask for in pay. I mean, how would you say that trend has evolved during the years? I mean, if the community, the own tech world, is talking about not as much focusing so much on the seniority part, how has the business part focused on it?
I think I see also that Helen is wanting to jump into the discussion. So, but I think it's an opposite force from my point of view, because since I've joined kind of 17 years ago on the IT consultancy side, it has always been the same question, where we need this structure to sort the commercial aspects of the work that we need to do. The kind of opposite force there is always that we want to take the higher price and the client wants to lower the price. And it has been the same structure for still up until this day. But it exists, and it's some sort of guiding star, at least, to not miss out on the level of something. I need this performance in the things I need to do. So I'm aiming for this level, at least.
Yes, Helen.
Yes. This is on? Yes, now it is. So I can't actually remember if these terms were used 15 years ago or not. But I think if they weren't, what people used to say instead is, I want a developer with 3 to 5 years of experience. I want a developer with at least 7 years of experience. So isn't this terminology actually a sign of maturity, that we're not talking about years? Because as you say, if you've done the same thing for 5 years, the years don't actually count. Whereas if we're talking about junior, senior, then we're looking at what have you achieved in those years? What have you learned? Not achieved, but what have you learned and how much experience do you have? So it's a more mature way of expressing your organization's needs. I need somebody who is senior rather than I need somebody with 5 years of .NET experience.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think it boils down to, let's say, when you hire people, you want to know if they can hit the ground running. That's most likely a senior person. Or if you take someone from school that has done some programming courses and wants to get into development, that's a junior then.
Yeah. And I think, Michael, you were onto something in your speech earlier. About things circling and coming back again, and that déjà vu feeling that you get when having experience over the years. How would you say, in the fast-paced world that we're living in, and they're coming in new requirements and new technology all the time, and there can be hard for a experienced developer, not old developer. I was about to say old developer. I was not going to. An experienced developer to keep track of all these and learn new things. How do you, as a senior or experienced developer, stay on top of things?
I would like to quote a colleague of ours, Erik Moberg, who said a great thing during one of our discussions when he said, the more experienced I get, I actually understand how unexperienced I am. And I think that's also part of being senior, having the humble point of view to stuff, and also having the curious mindset of finding new stuff and also benchmarking the new stuff and see, like, do we need to use it just because it's the coolest thing on the street right now, or should we go back and do the things that we know has a proven track record?
And that was a little bit what I meant before with what do we mean with seniority. I mean, I can be very senior in coding COBOL, but that is not making me senior in general, or I can be very senior in a specific tech stack. That is some kind of factor to also bring into the equation, I guess.
But I want to, I mean, since we were talking about 15 years ago, at the time, I think it was also very dependent on the type of company and the structure you were working in. And I started off in VM Data, and it's sort of a big, at the time, it was a cool place to be, and a very entrepreneurial spirit, but also a hierarchy company. And at the first day, I was introduced to the expression senior or junior or something, and that was the structure used in that company in order to understand sort of the level of knowledge in a way. And of course, without understanding where to place myself, I got a goal that I could aim towards. I wanted to become the senior consultant because that sounded cooler, and you can add it on the business card as well. So But I'm still, so many years later, I'm not sure if I ever ended up to be senior. But at least for me, that gave me a goal to aim towards at the time.
That explains a lot. I worked at Lunaström. I was P21.
Nice.
Pojke 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also focusing on your role as a consultant, I mean, there are a lot of senior engineers out there. But if you are a senior engineer, are you as equal senior as a consultant, or are those two, are the different measurements for being a senior consultant and a senior engineer, or what do you say?
I would say that there's a difference because mainly how I feel about things. I started in April. I've been here for 6 months. I don't feel senior. I don't feel like a senior consultant, at least. But that's how I am sort of portrayed to the client. So that's difficult to reason about. Being a senior for me is more about how long I have been doing a certain thing.
And I could just add on what Mikael said, because since we're a consultancy, our clients mainly reach out to us because they have a problem that they can't solve themselves. And I haven't been out to so many clients, but I guess that they already had developers hired at the company, and many of them have probably been there longer than many of our consultants has been working. But as you said, by being a senior consultant, you have been touched based on different domains, maybe different industries. You have seen a lot of things, and you could, as you say in Swedish, take the raisins from the cookie and see like, okay, we did that in that company, we did that at that client, so maybe we should take this direction. And I think that is hard to count in age. It's more like, okay, what do you actually bring in your backpack of experience?
Yeah. And also, I mean, I'm circling back to that question because I'm looking for more answers in that. I'm more curious about the difference about being a senior engineer and a senior consultant, and if there are different skill sets you learn when you've been in the consultancy business for a while that you only can achieve over years, or is it also, can you just expect, I'm awesome at engineering, I've been doing it for 10 years, therefore I'm also an awesome consultant, or do you think there are differences in it?
I want to start off there because I think regardless, it's always harder to be a consultant. For the simple reason that if you're in working for a company, your network is sort of set. But as a consultant, there is an ever-changing evolution of projects, clients, and all those different things where you each time have to re-establish. We talked about the change curve before, part of product management. And it's the same thing. Every time you visit a new client, you have to establish yourself. You have to build trust, and you have to create collaboration using communication. So it also requires a lot of additional skills that maybe you wouldn't utilize as working for a specific company at the time.
I would also say that a senior consultant must have some soft values. Then maybe it's not that necessary at a product company where people know you and stuff, but you have to quick get to know your customer, quick get them to like you and what you're doing, I guess. So some kind of soft skills is also.
I think we have a question here from Tobias. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question related to consulting versus just being an engineer or a designer. And I was wondering, how do you think about like different agencies or consultant companies that have different takes on what a senior consultant is? I know, for example, in management consultant, you can be a senior management consultant within a year to compete with other companies. Is there like a risk of watering out the term of seniority, or is it better or worse than, as Helen said, that we should use 5 to 7 years of experience?
Thank you for that question, because that leads us to an important area, and it's always about the context. I mean, when we talk about seniority in 1337, that means something. And then we have our clients, which are very different from each other, and probably they are referring to something else. Whilst, I mean, mentioning a company as McKinsey, where there's a super strong hierarchy culture, where you always have to prove yourself according to a set template part of your development within the company, that makes sense in that context. So, and we always will need context in order to understand things. That's how we understand the world. But we also must acknowledge that it might be very different from one place to another. I know there's a law firm in Stockholm where basically when you sign on, you have 6 years of service. And when you reach that 6 years, either you are fired or you become a part owner of the company. And that is clearly communicated at the entry point. And that is sort of the high performance organization within that specific context. So it's very different from case to case, I believe.
Yeah, I talked to a person the other day that claimed that on his company, they had to work 2 years and then they were senior developers. Yeah. So they had like 2 years of service, and then automatically you became a senior. And I mean,
so if you're taking employment at that company and then you work for a few months and then you say like, okay, I need to have a job break because I'm going to study, for example, and then you move back and you have 2 years of employment. So that's the tricky part. Could you actually measure in years or time? Like we have parental leave, for example, as well. Yeah,
but I guess even if you come to another company after that one, you cannot claim that you're a senior because they have different standards. So it's not a standard. Yeah.
Yes, then we had Praveen. Yes.
Mine was not more of a question, but something that I've seen. It's like I've worked with, as a consultant, you do get like more skill just by working with other people. And I've been in projects where some of the co-workers have been more experienced than I am in years, but they have not been exposed to the things that I've been exposed to. So I've been doing a lot of different things, and DevOps with newer .NET Core stuff, but they've been constricted by the company's budget or something, so they've not learned so much. So we, as consultants, are able to, like, even if you're having fewer years than them, we've been able to provide them more knowledge from outside. And I also think like when you become senior, it's like you have this mentality where you're not constrained by language or frameworks. You see them as a problem and you solve them with the best tools that's possible. And the companies are also looking for some personalities to do that. Then like I need 3 years experience they might ask for something like that, but usually.
That's a really interesting remark, and because you can see that, I mean, even though if you've been are really senior, been working with the same thing for 10 years in a row and solving the same kind of feature for 10 years in a row, and in comes a less experienced developer or engineer who can solve the problems in a much faster way or in a better way than he's been doing for the past 10 years, even though he's not senior. So that's a really good remark. I mean, I think that circles back to the question about how you approach problems and how you solve problems with the experience that you gain. I mean, if you only gain the same experience over the 10 past years, of course, that's how you're going to continue to solve that problem. But if you gain new knowledge and learn things all the time, you can find new ways of learning.
I really agree, but can it be like you, salesman, you see it in one way, you see the number of years, because you don't really get the technical part of our work, sometimes at least, but you know that you hear from the customer, for instance. But we, among each other, see each other in a different way. Like if we are using the right tool in the right position or in the right time.
And that's an interesting approach, and I think that's different between clients, from client to client. I mean, that's also an interesting question. I mean, does the level of seniority or the term seniority, does it differ between clients? What is your experience from that? Have you experienced?
Yeah, definitely, my experience.
We have Tobias as well. Oh, maybe it was, yeah.
I wanted to share my personal view on this matter, which actually does not directly relate to either years of experience or technical skills. Because in my practice, and that's something I strongly believe in, the difference between senior developer and non-senior developer is that a junior developer develops code writes code for computers, and the seniors, they write code for people. And that, in this case, we talk about people are both your colleagues, yourself tomorrow, and your customers. And in my experience, it's been maybe the best predictor of how actually senior the other person feels. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think that maybe junior developers often write code to solve a problem here and now and don't think too much about tomorrow or the next developer, whereas senior developers might write a bit cleaner code maybe and really do think about the next developer. So
I definitely think that a junior can come up with a one-liner and be proud of it, while a senior developer would look at it and like, I don't get this. This should be like 5 lines of code. So, yeah.
Writing code explicitly rather than implicitly.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a meta question. In the first panel, that was super easy for me to understand. It was like there's this question around how do we make design work and front end easier. I hear that a lot. I guess there's a similar relevance to that question, and I would be curious to hear how is that question from both developer or designer or a consultant perspective, but also from a consultancy perspective. Where do you meet that kind of question, and where is that like relevant to you? In what way?
I'm going to try and respond to the question by saying like an expression based on my experience working in IT for some time, and that is something I've learned sitting on the customer side, ordering projects, ordering things, and there was sort of a metric for success. And that is mixed teams, diverse teams. Basically, you don't want to be too heavy in any end of things. You want the perfect mix of the energy that comes from someone that is in the beginning of their career with the curiosity and maybe the mindset of, yes, we're going to fix this regardless of what, and they're going to just push through. And then you have the more experienced one, might having faced those type of problems before, and together they create sort of an ecosystem of success. Whilst in some other projects you can turn towards Accenture as an example. It's going to be very expensive, and they only kind of deliver the senior consultants. And the business output will be both expensive and maybe not that efficient, to be honest. And that is from a collaboration point of view. And you want to create these dynamic teams. So I'm using the expression junior, senior, etc., trying to set the balance in a team, at least when I was working as a client. That makes sense.
And that also creates a much better environment for leadership and mentoring and between the different hierarchy and the team topology. And I mean, as a senior consultant or senior engineer, you often have to hear, okay, you should lead this, you should mentor this and that. It's put on you as a weight to drive this forward. But is there anything you as senior engineers can learn from the more younger ones?
Definitely a lot. Like junior developers are very keen on learning new stuff. They are very curious and they are very naive, which is a good thing when you're trying to solve a problem, to solve it in a way that you didn't think was possible. Or like, yeah, I learned a lot from my junior colleagues, a lot.
Asking questions and
Yeah.
forcing you to explain.
Yeah, and
how
when
things
you
are.
explain something for somebody, you must understand it yourself.
I do really like. I think one of the best way of actually learning is to learn others in many ways. So yeah.
Yeah. So one of the theme that I feel like I was kind of noticing was that there was the conversation about these, like the split between kind of technical skills, the ability to like write good code in a broad areas of functionality, etc. So being able to implement solutions versus also these skills that are kind of more seemingly correlated with time spent doing different projects. Things like, you know, humility, collaboration, things that actually enable you to apply these skills strategically and insightfully to actually work with people and empower a team. So basically what I'm thinking is do you see the concept of years of experience as being used as kind of a proxy measure for those kind of like interpersonal broader skills, or do you do you think about those actively as like an individually analyzable thing? Like, do you see, for example, maybe people who have not the technical talent yet, but high talent in this more broader collaborative fashion?
Do you mean like people expect, if you have been working for 10 years, people expect you to behave in a way? Or is that what you mean? Basically?
Yeah, that with 10 years of experience,
right, yeah.
There's kind of an expectation that you probably have those skills, but is that something that we tend to just say, you probably have this, or is it something that we can analyze more and see?
I think you're very right, but I think you cannot, these days you cannot trust that someone is mature just because he has been working for 10 years. I mean, I've been working with people that have been working 20 years and still comes in the afternoon and have.
But I also think that we stumble upon something really interesting here, because I mean, regardless if you're senior or junior, but if you have spent 10 years in the business, the expectation on you and your salary must have the expectations must increase over time, regardless of what that is, if it's your people management skills or if it is by sharing knowledge within the company or something. It can't be the entry level of where you started. So, and there are good and bad examples about this, depending on the organization you're working in, where I was in HMM for some years, and it's really interesting because it was outspoken that if you pass a certain point, you were expected to be a presenter at a very high level of something, but you always have people that feel uncomfortable at hosting a presentation or running a meeting or whatever. And in that kind of expectation, people were pushed outside of the comfort zone, maybe counterproductive of the objective of why they should try and kind of challenge themselves in some way. And yes, of course, especially in the hierarchy companies, it's a very set path for you. If you are at the senior level 4, you are expected to find your own assignments, as an example. And you're also expected to sell while working in the assignment, adding colleagues into the client and so on. And that's measured and followed up upon in some companies as a structure. So, I mean, I don't think there is a coincidence that we're talking about seniority and juniority, but we have to be very specific about the context once again.
This is interesting. I mean, you're onto something here, and that is, I mean, what kind of specific contributions, except for writing the code or teaching others, I mean, are expected of a senior consultant or engineer coming in, technical or non-technical? I mean, what kind of expectations are there on a senior colleague?
Well, I would say, even though David and Henrik talked about not working with deadlines and so on, but I think sort of like you have expectations on your as an employee, but you have also the client has an expectation on you as a consultant, which means that, okay, if they decide to hire a senior consultant, they most likely will expect that, okay, if they ask you to scope the work and set sort of like a timeline, how long it would take, you expect it to be as accurate as possible. And it's a lot of things that comes around being like, because one way of thinking, like actually choosing a more senior consultant would probably have a higher hourly rate. You also sort of like shortcutting. It's a few things that you don't need to do as taking a junior consultant, for example, or hire a junior developer for employment. But so it's a lot of like expectation from the client, but also from us as a company or an employer that, okay, if we have a senior consultant, we have some expectations, and I think it's all about responsibility.
I think Hydling was asking a question, right? Yeah.
Yes. So when we're doing like the technical interviews, we have changed the format from time to time, and in the beginning it was like from level 1 to level 4, and yeah, and we're not using that anymore, and I think that's probably a good thing. But one takeaway that I'm still like trying to think about when I'm having those interviews was that if you're like on level 1 and 2, then you're probably like on par with the client, and if you're like scoring like level 3 or 4, then you're probably a little bit better than like the normal employees at the client, and would be able to help them solve the problems in a better way. And I'm trying to like, I'm not taking the levels with me, but that mindset when I'm holding the interviews helps me a lot. So I know that for when someone is talking about databases in a way, I know that for sure that, okay, this person can help almost any client with their database if they're not Spotify or Google. And that helps me when we're doing the assessment. And maybe that's something that comes, and there the number of years doesn't really matter that much, but in the end, if it should be a go or a no-go, I mean, I suspect that like a senior person would like have at least some level, like some areas where they are better than the client, so to speak.
But if number of years does not matter, what traits matter?
But I think sort of Artem, you were also into something like. I love to put the difference between actually being a coder or a programmer or actually being a developer. Do you fix the bugs, or do you actually add value and helping the client doing things greater? And I think that's also part of being a senior, to actually find the pain points and not just doing stuff as the norm, like as you said, really help the clients with databases, for example.
Yeah, but fixing bugs.
Yeah, but of course, yeah, but
Sorry.
That's what we all do.
Anders stumbled into it, and then also Örjan, it's the levels here. And doesn't it, the seniority with levels, it's 1 to 5, and it comes from just as in the public affairs and trades, you Pontus knows that if we're going to answer to this, we really need 4 level 3s and 1 level 4 and 1 level 5 to be able to answer it. And then that is really counted in years. But maybe everything comes from that the regions don't know how to kind of summarize it up, and then the other companies just take that as a kind of a easy sloppy way to say seniority, but it doesn't really mean that way.
But it's a great point there, Christopher, and I know that there is a lot of different front-end frameworks coming out every once in a while. And speaking of the public sector, they actually having a framework that says like a level 4, you need to be working for at least this amount of years. And it's just, we have a crash collision over there as well, because being a front-end developer level 4 says that I think it's 9 to 12 years, if I remember correctly. And we have frameworks that haven't even exist for 9 to 12 years. So we have a clash over there. And that's also quite interesting in what we're spinning around all the time, is seniority actually put into years of experience or something else.
But seniority can also be how fast you pick something up, I guess, and that comes with how long. That comes with mistakes and
If you really want to sort of compare years, then you need something in between junior and senior as well.
Like mid-level,
intermediate or something like that.
Usually it is in these different ways. But I know that we're almost over time, but I still feel conflicted. I can't get rid of the thought that time also matters. So it's sort of a provoking to say that the number of years doesn't count. Of course it counts in a way. We can't neglect that. And I thank you, Christopher, for mentioning public sector, because there it's sort of to the point where it's almost ridiculous. You must have 10 years. We don't care about your skills. You should have worked for 10 years, and that's it. So we can't neglect from the fact that time also matters in the amount of years in this. At some point, and I'm very conflicted.
I think normally it does, but it does not have to. That's my standpoint.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for this discussion, and we hand over to Britta.
Thank you all.